So if you're using an ACT prep book or you're hiring an ACT tutor, you've got no shot. I got a 36 on my ACT, and over the last 6 years, I've helped thousands of students get to their dream scores as well. Now in that process, I've seen both what works for students and more importantly, what doesn't work for students. In this video, I'm going to point out what the worst study methods are that I see students using all of the time. I'm going to tell you exactly why these study methods might be making your score worse, and we're going to go over exactly what you should be doing instead. Now this might be one of the most important videos that I make because I see 95% of students making these mistakes. And ultimately, it's holding them back from getting that life-changing score on the ACT that can get them into a top college or earn them hundreds of thousands of dollars of scholarships. Now the first, and I think probably the most common mistake that I see students making, is going out and just buying a full-length ACT prep book that has like a bunch of those full-length practice tests in them and that has the solutions at the end for you to look through. And before you say it, I know you're probably thinking, Carson, I've seen some of your content before. You recommend real full-length practice tests. Why is this such a bad method if these are the real full-length practice tests? And yes, I know I've said in the past that full-length practice tests are the best way to study for the ACT, but it does not stop there, and that's where students make the mistake with these prep books. A lot of students will go out, they'll buy some of these prep books, and they'll just take a bunch of these full-length practice tests from start to finish. And maybe if they're doing a better job than most, they'll even look through their incorrect answers and look at the explanations for why they missed some of those questions. But even if they do all of this stuff, that's still not the right way to go through the process of actually learning and correcting your mistakes so that you can improve your score the next time you take the test. So I say that these prep books can be very useful, but they have to be used in the correct way. And most students are not using these prep books in the correct way, and it's actually tricking them into thinking that they're making improvement and that they're doing proper ACT studying, when in reality, they're actually just wasting their time and they're not getting any better. This happens so often. Students will come to me and they'll say, hey, I've already done a ton of ACT practice. I've gone through 7 full-length practice tests and I've graded all of them, but my score just didn't seem to go up over the course of those 7 practice tests. And typically, when I dig into it a little bit more, what the student did was they just took a full-length practice test, they graded it, they got their score, maybe as a 23, 25, whatever it was, and then they look at their incorrect answers, maybe they look at the explanations, and then they just go on and they take another practice test a couple days later, and then they expect to do better. But nowhere in this process was any form of actual learning done, and that's why that student got the same score the second time they took it, and then the same score the third time they took it, and so on and so forth. If you're just going through your test after you take it and all you're doing is grading it and maybe looking at the answer choices that you got wrong and possibly looking at an explanation for why that answer choice was wrong and what the right answer choice was, then you're nowhere near the process of actual learning. What you need to do in order to actually learn is be presented with the same conditions, be presented with that same question or a very similar question type on the ACT, and the next time you see it, you do something differently. The next time you see it, you understand what type of question it is. You understand, hey, I missed this question the last time. Let me think back, why did I miss that question last time? And now you need to have a new approach, a new thought process on this type of question that can actually get you to the right answer. So when you're grading and reviewing your answers to these full-length tests and these booklets, what you should probably be doing is spending 2 or maybe even 3 times as long reviewing your incorrect answers as you did actually taking the test. So if you take a 3-hour test, you should probably be spending somewhere between 6 and 9 hours fully reviewing your incorrect answers and understanding why you got those wrong and understanding what you need to do next time in order to not get that type of question wrong. And ideally what you'd be doing in this 6 to 9 hours is keeping track of every single question that you missed or guessed on in a study document and trying to categorize these questions into a type of question so that you can kind of have different buckets of questions. Like, okay, I missed a couple semicolon questions on the English section. I missed 2 or 3 SOHCAHTOA questions on the math section. And maybe I missed 7 yes, yes, no, no questions on the science section. So now you know exactly what question types you're actually missing the most of, and you can come up with an approach to solve each one of these question types. And after that, you might think you're ready to take another practice test, but no, you're still not there. You're not ready to take another practice test yet. What you need to do then is actually go through each of the strategies that you came up with for solving that question type and find a bunch of similar problems. Find a bunch of similar questions that are exclusively asking about that question type. So if we're doing yes, yes, no, no questions on science, you would want to find a bunch of just yes, yes, no, no questions on the science section and solve a bunch of those yes, yes, no, no questions in a row without looking at any other questions until you start to see your ability to get those questions correct go up over time. Then you would want to repeat that, probably for those semicolon questions or the SOHCAHTOA questions. And then once you start to see improvement on all of those question types, that is when you can finally take another ACT practice test. So if you're one of those students who's just taking a bunch of full-length practice tests from a prep booklet and you're not going through this full process that I just described, then you're making a huge mistake and you're probably wasting a lot of your time in the process and actually harming your own ACT score. And now the next mistake that I see students making, this one might be a little bit controversial, but a big mistake is actually hiring an ACT tutor. And I actually was an ACT tutor in the past until I realized there's a big problem with just tutoring in general. So I stopped being a tutor for the ACT. There's a couple big problems that I see with ACT tutoring, and pretty much all these are holding the student back from actually making significant improvement on the ACT. Again, the first point here comes back to the process of actual learning. And I don't think that any true learning really occurs with an ACT tutoring schedule. ACT tutors typically work with students in a one-on-one session, and they go through a bunch of practice questions and they help them through the questions that they get wrong. They don't really do anything on the questions they get right, but maybe they give an explanation or something for why the student got a question wrong, and they hope that maybe the next time the student sees that question, the student will get that question correct. The problem with this is that students are just being spoon-fed information on the questions that they get wrong, and similar to what was going on with the ACT prep booklets that students are buying, there's no real learning occurring. Even if they're looking at the incorrect answers that they got, and then they're having someone explain it to them, or they're looking at the explanation for how to get to the correct answer, they're not actually learning how to do it themselves, and they're definitely not ingraining the correct process over and over again to make sure that when they get to the testing center, they can actually get that question correct. Even if you have a great ACT tutor who explains the concepts very well and assigns homework and worksheets for the student to work on outside of the one-on-one meetings, the student isn't actually getting better in the one-on-one sessions. The only way for students to actually make improvements is for them to be able to recognize question types on the ACT and know what they need to do the next time that they see a question like that, and they need to be able to do that on their own without having the tutor spoon feed the information to them. This is actually pretty comparable to a big mistake that I was making with my baseball career back in the day. I really wanted to be the best hitter that I could possibly be, so I had a great one-on-one hitting coach that I would go to all the time. And whenever I was hitting with him, he would always correct my swing, tell me exactly what I was doing wrong mechanically, and point me in the right direction every time. And so whenever I was hitting under his supervision, I was doing great. I was feeling awesome. I was feeling extremely confident. The ball was jumping off my bat, and I was hitting home runs all the time in these practices with the hitting coach. But the problem is I was being spoon-fed that information. I was being spoon-fed the exact right mechanics, where to hold my hands, what time I needed to load, exactly how to keep my hands in the right place and keep the bat path going to make the best contact possible. But the problem with this is that as soon as I would leave the supervision of the hitting coach, I would start doing things incorrectly again. So whenever I got in season and I didn't have that hitting coach there watching my every move, I would start going slightly down the wrong path. Maybe my hands would go a little bit in the wrong direction and I wouldn't notice it, and I didn't have the hitting coach there to correct it again for me. And so obviously I would start doing poorly, and I would wonder where I went wrong, and I would wonder why I was doing so well just a bit ago, and I felt good and everything, and all of a sudden I was losing it, and now I wasn't hitting as well as I should be. If you're working with an ACT tutor, this is probably the same feeling that you might have. You can do really well when you're in the sessions with that tutor, and everything makes sense when they explain it well, and you can regurgitate it back to them. But again, since you're being spoon-fed that information, you're not actually learning and ingraining that learning so that you can do it on your own. What I needed to be doing with my hitting was being pointed in the right direction of, hey, this is exactly why you need to be doing this with your hands. This is what it should feel like when you're doing it right. This is what it should feel like when you're doing it wrong. Not just being told every time that I made a mistake, okay, hey, do this instead. I needed to have a better understanding of the types of mistakes I was making and how to correct them, and more importantly, how to recognize that I was making those mistakes. Now, similarly, on the ACT, you do need some sort of a coach who can point you in the right direction and show you the types of mistakes that you're making. But this needs to be more about teaching you how to recognize a question type and then understanding what you need to do whenever you see that type of question on the ACT. Not just directly explaining the concept to you and then hoping that you can regurgitate that exact answer if the ACT tests it in the exact same way. So this is what I would call ACT coaching instead of ACT tutoring. Tutors, on one hand, are incentivized to meet with you as much as possible and prolong all of the one-on-one time that you spend with them, because that's how they get paid. The more one-on-one time you spend with your tutor, the more you have to pay them. Coaches, on the other hand, are incentivized to get you the best score possible on the ACT, whether that's meeting with that coach one-on-one more frequently or pointing you in the right direction and letting you learn the process on your own. Of course, with all coaching, there's going to be a mix of both. There's going to be a lot of one-on-one interaction, but there's also going to be a lot of learning done where the student is doing that outside of the coaching sessions. So if you're making either of these mistakes, either with the prep booklet or with hiring an ACT tutor, think twice about your preparation process and how you could possibly improve it to make sure you're actually going through the process of learning. Because if you don't really have a great process for preparing for this test, you're going to be wasting a ton of time, you're going to be wasting a ton of money, and you're going to be wasting a ton of effort and racking up a bunch of stress that you don't need. So rather than wasting all of that on these two options, what you can do instead is check out all the information that I've put out on ACT Hacking, which is my process for taking students from wherever they are to their dream scores. This process is a really simple 3-step process that includes finding your highest priority question types to work through, learning how to hack each one of those question types, and then ingraining that process so that it becomes second nature on test day. You can find a ton more information about that process right here on my YouTube channel and over on Instagram as well. So check both of those out for free guides on how to improve your ACT score. But if you want to go through the coaching process and have me personally take your student by the hand and drag them across the finish line to their target score on the ACT, then check out the information in the description of this video. It will tell you how to get in touch with me, but typically the best way to do that is to go on my Instagram profile, click on the button that says message, and direct message me the word boost on Instagram. I'll get some background information on your situation so that I can create a personalized coaching plan for you or for your student, and we can make sure that you max out your ACT score. Other than that, stay tuned to the channel, both here on YouTube and over on Instagram, for more free information on the ACT, getting into the best colleges, and earning the most scholarships.